So lead me up to that path of,
Sure.
college to real estate.
Sorry, I jump ahead a lot, don't I?
No, you're
Um,
good. No, I love it.
so college, my first semester, I wound up getting like a 3.9, and I was like, okay, I guess I won't fail out. And by the time that I went to declare for entrepreneurship as a major, they had changed it so it wasn't available as a major. It was available as a minor. And I didn't want to lose those classes because they were some of the most interesting classes for me. So I ended up switching to organizational development, which is effectively business management, people management, not HR, but working with people. Um,
Sure.
so that was my major. Minor in entrepreneurship, fell one credit short of my recording technology minor. My roommate at the time was teaching that class. So I was like, look, I probably am not going to own a recording studio by that point in time.
Yeah.
I had lots of fun in college, but also started getting really involved in like business fraternity, social fraternity, some for fun, some for, the resume, all that good stuff.
Sure.
Graduated undergrad in 2009, which was a pretty rough time. So I wound up sticking around for another year and just got my master's. I got it paid for through a grad assistantship. And then after that, I went into this is actually super ironic. My grad assistantship job was to help people get corporate jobs. And I was actually pretty decent at it. I understood the game well enough.
Sure.
Um, so then I went and got a job selling payroll because I wanted to do what my mom did, which was medical device sales. Right before that point in time, it used to be you had to go into pharmaceutical sales, but
Sure.
that path was starting to have a different connotation. So basically everyone said you have to go take the hardest job in sales and prove yourself, and that was selling payroll. But the funny thing is, I hated selling payroll. so,
Explain that. Explain what selling payroll is, just real quick.
so payroll
Simple version.
services, so like you may for your team have payroll. So you have like Paychex is who I worked for, ADP, Paycor. There's a billion of them now, and it's
Okay.
payroll services so that you can cut checks. They calculate all of your taxes and basically take that burden off that almost never as a small business owner you're doing yourself, but you pay an accountant. But if you have
Gotcha.
the economies of scale of a large payroll company, it's usually more cost effective.
So they're like the software behind.
Yeah, primarily, but we sold the people too.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
But that job, it was not my gig. I have tons of respect because I actually met some really good people. But after like 3 months, I knew I was like, this is not what I want to do. But it was still a pretty bad economy. I had bought a house actually right when I graduated. My parents helped me, and I bought a complete fixer-upper in Dublin. Actually, it's not true. It was straight 1980s. It was very satisfactory to the previous owners, but
Yeah.
bought it with the intent that essentially it would just didn't want to flip it. I didn't really even think of
Right.
flipping at the time because it was 2010, 2011. But it was just make it new,
Yeah.
learn some skills, practice some stuff. And so I lived in that house, and that was this is where it gets a little cliche. When I was like, I want to go a different direction, I wound up thinking of real estate because I was like, hey, I really enjoyed the process of buying a home and working on it. So my realtor at the time, I reached out to her. She basically was like, hey, it's a harder job than you might think, but you could probably do well at it if you wanted. And I was looking for something to be an entrepreneur, but have some bumpers to it, which one of the things I wound up being right. I didn't know enough at the time to know that I was right. But in real estate, it's nice because, you have a brokerage, you have people around you, and it's a well-sustained business over hundreds of years. I mean,
Yep.
thousands at it that way. So it wound up being that right combination. And that's when I went into real estate. Now I have been out of the business. I tried to get out like 3 times, but I got sucked back in. And then after I had kids, it was pot committed. Because I
What?
started real estate young, I wanted to try other things, you know? I felt kind
Okay.
of jealous that other people got to try different careers in their exploration.
That's interesting because normally it's the opposite. I feel like,
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes, and I can even speak for myself, right? It's like, are you truly, what's the true goal with what you're trying to accomplish in life, right? Like, are you so attached? Is it like for me? I'm just rambling now, but to try to get my point across, it's like I love traveling. I love the idea of freedom and flexibility to be wherever I want to be and still produce an income.
Right.
So, like, am I so attached to this identity as a real estate agent where there's so many different avenues and careers to still be able to accomplish the freedom flexibility piece and be anywhere? And I find, I'm just curious of, what that you got in and out multiple times because you did want to try a couple different things where normally it's the opposite. It's like,
Yeah.
no, I want to be this.
Yeah. Um, I mentioned, and it was kind of a setup because I figured eventually we'd talk about this. I had an eclectic background, right? So I had these different
Yeah.
seasons. And I'm a big believer in you don't know something until you try it. And because I mean, I was 23 when I got in the business. Nowadays, that's normal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. Kids actually go to college because they want to sell real estate. But, for us, like when we got into the business, being young was exceptional. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't know other people that were doing it at that age. Actually, that's not true. I went through licensing with like two kids I graduated with, but we were the first of that path, you know?
Right.
So, but I still wanted to try some different things. I mean, I did, even though I had that entrepreneurship bug and I say it's genetic, I don't really know where it came from because both my parents, my dad was an attorney, but he worked for the state. So he always had state benefits, lots of protection. He worked in a
Right.
very insulated environment. My mom sold, and certainly if you don't, it was mostly commission. And if you know anything about medical device, obviously selling is very important to be successful. And she
Right.
was very successful, but she was still in an insulated environment to some extent, benefits, all that stuff. So I always kind of had in the back of my head, like, am I doing the right thing? Even though I was on a really good trajectory, I still was like, I wonder what it's like. So I actually left and I went into software sales, which was
Okay.
like a slam dunk. But the company that I went to was in the middle of a huge remod. They just got bought out by a venture capital firm. They were trying to dump that venture capital firm and get a higher acquisition because the C-suite was looking for that cheddar. And
Sure.
yeah, well, it wound up being a little more nefarious motivations on their end. But I was sitting there and I was making, it was like a decent base salary, we'll say. It was
Yeah.
something that if you had been in real estate for a couple years, you'd be happy. But I also was like, I'm not making any commission because we didn't have a product to sell because they were transitioning.
Right.
Uh, and so I did like 3 months of that. And I was like, I'll just go sell real estate. Now, ironically, I still was in that exploratory phase. So I went and became a lender. And I am so thankful because I think everything I've done has had a higher purpose.
Sure.
Becoming a lender, mind opening. I mean, just completely eye opening to how working with clients and like, in particular, when I have listings, one of my, strengths, at least that what I think is a strength, I'm going to probably talk too highly of myself,
It's
is
okay.
being
You're
able,
allowed to.
yeah, I mean, isn't that's the dynamic, I suppose. Someone knows me is watching and like, okay. But anyway, being a lender, it's nice. Like I get an offer and I look at the pre-approval and I'm like, okay, I know the red flags, the stuff that may not necessarily stand out to someone else, or I can call the lender and I can ask some questions that may be a little bit more advanced or just poignant, not necessarily advanced. And that helps me determine if this really is as strong of a buyer as we're looking for, because especially when you had multiple offers, it's like, great, the highest price isn't always your best buyer.
Right.
So it helped me a lot in that scenario. And then after lending, I was like, okay, cool. I like this. I wanted to use the financial part of my brain, but realized probably not my highest and best use. And then I went and became a team leader / manager for a Keller Williams for a year. And then I had my first kid, and was like, sales is actually better. And oh boy, there's some operating principles out there like, you should not have said that, but I just did. So I went back into sales, and it's been kind of the happily ever after story.
No, that's awesome. What made you go back to what made you really get into it? Was it just the experience of you enjoying the process of you buying your own home? Like, the looking for the home, the offer process and negotiations. Was it simply just that, or did you end up having some sort of uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Passion for real estate at that time?
Um, to be totally candid, it was more of the equivalent of like if you were to say, "Hey, I want to open a franchise," and you just went to the franchise website and you're like, "Okay, this one makes the most sense for me."
Yeah,
That was probably more of how I felt about it, because I was like, I want to go the entrepreneurship route. A lot of like true franchises, like my brother and I were talking about opening like a gym at that point in time, and it was intriguing, but also my brother, he's 11 years older than me, different phase of life, way more
right.
capital, and being partners with him in that dynamic also seemed like it would be tough, like on our relationship. So it was more of a happenstance. And like I said, I'm just more of a go out and try it kind of guy. And so that's ultimately what I did. I just tried it. I wound up being good at real estate, at least I think so. Not right away necessarily, but I understood the basics. The only thing I really had going for me at the very beginning is I was way too cocky. I was very full of myself. And at a time where the market was really depressed, that wound up being the thing that helped me stand out. Now I'm just more of a traditional realtor where I'm like, okay, we'll see what happens.
What year did you end up actually getting your license?
2011.
Okay,
So,
so we're the same year.
okay. I was February. When were you?
I got licensed in August.
Okay. Look, let me tell you that 6 months makes a difference, John.
Well, I tell people all the time, it's, getting into real estate at that time it is a huge benefit for me and for others like us that, made it through, not just 08, 09, 2010, but we got the tail end of, in my
Yeah.
opinion, of what was bad, but we still got the experience of foreclosures, short sales, and everything else in between of, walking through a home and being able to say, okay, well, let's go FHA or not. HUD
You're right.
homes, you know how many agents don't even know what a HUD home is, or a
Yeah.
foreclosure, or how to handle a short sale, that's licensed right now.
Yeah.
So
Or do a
we
request
got
a remedy.
we got lucky that
Yeah.
we came in during that time.
Yeah. My wife actually said, she was like, the funny thing, because the market's obviously had a little bit of a shift. And she said, I think you actually do better in this market than you do just the craziness of the last, 3 to 5 years. And
Yeah.
I'll go with it, because if she says it, I'm just going to take it as truth. But I do think it's true. It's like, look, this is the chance to differentiate in a market where we have a lot of realtors. Someone who's been through the request of remedies, that understands, yeah, will this go FHA? Just went through a VA scenario where I had the buyer, and I feel like every time you go VA, it's like, look, it's just a roll of the dice. Like, I see some things, but will they see it?
Right.
Well, the appraiser saw it. The listing agent is started their career in this more hustle bustle, conventional 20%, 50,000
Yeah.
appraisal guarantee market. So she didn't actually have a lot of experience in the VA. So it wound up being beneficial though, because at least I had been through it and actually gone through a repair, and was able to collaborate to get it to the closing table, and we did, and didn't lose a day on it either. We actually closed early.
Yeah.